Now, when you look at, though, why they're in this situation and why we have for example, the German people pitted against the Greek people, I think we really get to the core of this issue. Let me quote here Matt Iglesias from Vox. He says, with Greece facing insolvency 5 years ago, the people running Europe came up with a deeply unsatisfying solution. Rather than default on its debts to private creditors, Greece would be giving money by its European partners to pay them off. But the debt would not actually be forgiven. It would simply be transferred to the European Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and a passel of other European states. Whoa, think about that for a second. I'm not sure a lot of folks understand that or knew that or discuss it nearly enough. So it turns out there were private banks in Europe who made loans to Greece. Greece couldn't pay them off. Well, there's a fairly normal situation when you give out loans. You assess risk, and if you didn't do a good job of assessing risk, sometimes you lose your money. Welcome to capitalism. That's how it works, right? And you assess a certain interest rate based on the risk that you have. But right now in Europe, like we have in the US, we don't really have capitalism. What we've done is privatize the gains and socialize the losses. So 5 years ago, the European governments and the International Monetary Fund, et cetera, came in and said, hey, private banks, you're free to go. Here, we'll pay you off. And we'll take on the debt on behalf of the other citizens of Europe. Why in the world would you do that? You see, that's the underlying problem. What they did, and this is the oldest trick in the book, is get the people to fight among themselves, to make this a German versus Greek problem rather than a Greece versus dumbass creditors who lent them money they shouldn't have lent. Now, look, if you're Greece, it's a little tough to say, hey, dummy, you shouldn't have lent me money. Okay, you're in a difficult situation. I certainly wouldn't phrase it that way. But if you're an outside person looking at that situation, you can say, hey, listen, yes, it's the fault of the Greeks for not being able to pay their debt. It happens all the time. It happens with governments. It happens with corporations. Donald Trump's corporations have gone bankrupt 4 different times. It's not an unusual circumstance. But it's also the fault of the creditors who did not assess risk properly. And what happened? They got let off the hook right away. They got all the gains, and then when it came to the losses, no, you socialize those. All of a sudden, you've got socialism, and you put that onto the people of France, Germany, and other parts of Europe, and then you say to those same German people, no, the enemy isn't the guys who you just paid for no goddamn reason. The enemy are the Greeks. So you go fight them. Like here in America, this is, again, the oldest trick. What you do is you take all the money, like the bailout of the banks that we did in 2008, after they crashed the economy, after they cost us 8 million jobs, you pay them all off 100 cents on the dollar, which is unbelievable. You give them all the money, even though they're the ones who screwed it up. And then you say, no. Now, the middle class and the poor, you guys fight amongst yourselves. No, it was the teachers' union fault. It was the poor people who were borrowing too much money for their houses. It was black people. Oh, they told us to give us, told them to give us loans, and look at what happened. No. It was the private banks that screwed it up, both in America and here in Europe. But they're off scot-free, and now we're fighting amongst each other. It's gross. It's absolutely gross. So the good German people and other people in Europe who are mad at the Greeks, look, I know why. Look, in the beginning, the retirement age in Greece was 58. That's too low. Now, here in America, they're trying to raise the retirement age from 65 and from 67. I fight against that. There has to be some bounds of reason. But 58 is pretty low compared to the rest of the world. But it's not that way anymore. That was the old rule. Since 2007, they raised it to the age of 67. So now the big complaint of some of these, the European Central Bank, et cetera, is, well, there are a lot of loopholes, and women don't have to go to 67. They're at 60. They should be brought from 60 to 65, and then you should close some of the loopholes. Now we're arguing over minutia. I mean, you can go either way on that, or you can go somewhere in the middle and reach a reasonable agreement instead of pitting them against one another. So yes, a big percentage of the domestic gross product of Greece goes to their pensions. I understand that. They've got to cut that down. They understand that. The question is, what is the reasonable middle ground? Not, no, that's it, no more pensions for you guys, and austerity. In fact, let me go to Paul Krugman now. He says, austerity probably shrinks the economy faster than it reduces debt, so that all that suffering serves no purpose. Do you understand that? You see, if you don't have austerity measures, Krugman and other economists argue your economy would grow faster, which would actually bring in more revenue to the government and help pay the creditors back quicker. But you do the austerity, you destroy the economy, and they have over 25% unemployment in Greece, then the government doesn't have any revenue, and the situation gets worse. Why did you go through all that pain? It was counterproductive. Krugman finally says, if they can't make a go of Europe's common currency, it's because that common currency offers no respite for countries in trouble. And so he says, look, you know what? Also, part of the problem is the euro. If the euro cannot withstand any government having issue with its debt, which invariably will happen, if it wasn't going to be Greece at this time, it was going to be another country at another time. Perhaps the Germans, who have gone through a lot of problems with debt in their past, right? And so if your euro cannot handle any kind of bump in the road like that, maybe the problem isn't Greece, the problem is the euro, because you've built an inflexible system. So it's not to say the Greeks didn't borrow too much money. It's not to say that they didn't have some hand in this problem. Of course they did. But if you think it's only the Greeks' fault and that the answer is to crush the Greek people more, which is, of course, what we hear from the powers that be in the establishment, well, that's wrong. That's not true. And oftentimes it is counterproductive. What we need instead is a reasonable compromise, which is what usually happens when people cannot pay their debts. You say, I will pay you back this much through this process, and then we'll call it even. Trump has done it 4 times. Companies in this country have done it over and over again. And by the way, whenever they go bankrupt, the big banks love to do this. But when it comes to the Greek people, all of a sudden, no, it's not allowed. We need to crush them further, and they need to bend to our will. Well, guess what? They voted no, and they are not going to bend to your will. So now you've all got a problem. Okay, come back to the table, come up with a reasonable solution. Otherwise, no one wins.